England have lost the Euro 2024 final by 2-1 against a pretty fabulous Spanish side. But I can't help but think that in the final moment, in the final, Gareth Southgate took one step back instead of taking the step forwards. Just before we get into England, and trust me, we will be talking about England, I just want to make something crystal clear. Spain were the better side by a country mile. Take a look at this. This is the attacking momentum bar, and what it indicates is the momentum that either side has at certain moments in the match. So, here we can see Spain absolutely dominating this. The higher the bar, the higher the momentum that the team has. And as you can see, England barely had anything at any point in the game. Perhaps a little spurt here or there, but nothing really to shout about. And this was due to Spain's dominance, their understanding of how to play the game, their ability on and off the ball, and in every single category, they were better. Higher XG, 1.95 compared to England's 0.53. Higher possession, higher chances, more shots. We can go on. We can continue. They in fact had some unbelievable metrics. Touches in the penalty area. They had double the amount of touches that England did, or near enough. They scored 2 of their big chances, but they missed 3 of them. And then we take a look at some other stats. They had double the amount of passing. Double the amount of accurate passes. Think about that. In a final. That is incredible. Incredible. 128 of those completed passes were in England's third. In Spain's final third. That is remarkable. Comparing that to 55. Again, double. Spain were fantastic. They were brilliant. They were wonderful and thoroughly deserved to win. But that does not mean that England weren't terrible. One thing about this game between England and Spain that will likely haunt me from an England perspective is why Gareth Southgate changed the formation that he used against the Netherlands for this game against Spain. He set up his team with a 4-2-3-1. And I'm not going to lie to you guys, I don't know why. I can speculate, I can assume, but it doesn't make any sense to me from any aspect. So let's go through it. You've got Bellingham out on the left-hand side for whatever reason. He's not a left midfielder. He doesn't enjoy doing it. He'll do it for the team, but he doesn't have the pace to be able to get away. He doesn't have any kind of sprinting capabilities to be able to take up team up the pitch, which is one of the areas, if you watched the preview and the setup video that I did previously, you'll know that that's one of the main areas that England needed to look at. He didn't do that. You had Phil Foden onto Rodri. Yes, he's more central, but did he get on the ball? No. Did he really hamper Rodri in stopping him from playing out? Not really, no. You had Kane trying to press Lenormand and Laporte, failing to do so and then being quite stationary at times. They always had an outball in Cucurella. Bukayo Saka didn't really offer too much from a defensive point of view. I don't blame that on him. I just think that the system doesn't suit the way that England want to quote-unquote press. You had a massive imbalance in midfield. Dani Olmo and Morata dropping a little bit deeper. This caused Declan Rice and Kobbie Mainoo a load of problems, but it also meant that Fabian Ruiz always had a free option. So at times Mainoo would come and jump to try and help out with that, help out with Foden and Kane. But what ended up happening was that Olmo was free. This one here is absolutely incredible. Right, it just makes me laugh. It's incredible. It's madness. Right. So you've got Phil Foden and you've got Harry Kane. They are trying to pressurise the Spain build-up, but they can't do that because of the amount of Spain players that are currently here. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4. This is why Kobbie Mainoo has jumped, because he's trying to help with that. Instead of having a 4v2, you've now got a 4v3. The problem with that is the distance that Kobbie Mainoo and Declan Rice now have with each other. The two main centre midfielders. Look at how far in field Jude Bellingham has drifted inside. Now this does not lend to a cohesive defensive unit. Not only is the actual distance between Harry Kane, who is here, And the rest of his teammates, not only is it nearly the entire just length of a half, it boggles the mind, honestly. The ball gets played up over the top to an on-running Carvajal who has lost Jude Bellingham right here. You've got Yamal coming short, which pulls Luke Shaw, who's over here. It's just really well worked from Spain, but it's clearly an England side that doesn't know what they're doing. The ball gets played over the top, and look at the run from Carvajal here. It's really well done. But again, I maintain, look at the distance between Kobbie Mainoo and Declan Rice. It's acres. And this is essentially why England did so poorly. Because I don't think they're comfortable in the system. I don't think they're comfortable in the roles. You've got players trying to take moments into their own hands, and in doing that, you're unbalancing the shape of the side. I'm not blaming Kobbie Mainoo whatsoever. I'm not blaming any of these players. I think they've had a system given to them that doesn't necessarily suit them in any given way, shape, or form. And in doing so, you've got a mismatch in so many different ways. And then, of course, the ball gets played over. You've got John Stones and Mark Gahey. And all of a sudden, look at this. Look, because of the Spain runners, you've got a 2v2. It's just incredible, honestly. It was baffling to see. It ends up coming across. It gets deflected away. And what's this? You've got your two main Spain right-sided players in Carvajal and Lamine Yamal, and they are currently having a 2v1 battle with Jude Bellingham because Luke Shaw has had to drift in field. It's textbook. It's textbook, honestly. We isolated the flanks, we said about the flanks and the way that we built it up, and England didn't do anything to try and nullify it. And I fear that Gareth Southgate decided to regress back to this because he didn't have a proper tactic or a way of dealing with Spain's wide men. Instead of this, John Stones tucks, Kyle Walker tucks, and then really latches on to Dani Olmo. But what happens then? One of the most dangerous players on the pitch, Nico Williams, ends up being completely free. This is what happened for Spain's first goal. You had Lamine Yamal being able to drift infield because of the runs that Alvaro Morata made behind Mark Gahey. And this meant that there was a load of space just in front of the England back four. Declan Rice was a bit overwhelmed because Yamal was cutting inside. Luke Shaw couldn't follow the run because of the overlapping run from Carvajal, and it all became a little bit of a mess. And if I'm honest with you, it looked like a side that didn't know what they were doing. We criticised them for a lack of movement, a lack of drive, a lack of determination, not showing for their fellow teammates, and I put that down to a lack of understanding of the system that they're expected to play. If you contrast that with the way that the Spain side set up and the way they played, they all knew their positions. They all knew where the ball was meant to be going. They all knew the flow of the game through the lines, through the wing play. They knew when to come inside. They knew when to go back out. They knew the rotation was correct because they've been playing that system. I've seen some people say that the negativity surrounding this loss to Spain in the final is overblown and that there's nothing wrong with being beaten by Spain, and to a certain extent I completely agree with that, because there is nothing wrong with being beaten by a team of the calibre of Spain. My problem comes with the tactics involved in setting up the side to try and beat this Spanish side. You've set up with a formation and a personnel lineup in specific roles that clearly do not suit them. You've had evidence that it does not suit them, and yet you persist with said system when you've already found something else that has worked, to a certain extent, of course. But let's take a look at Spain's first goal, and I'll try to explain what I mean. So this is after the second half kickoff. I believe it's about 1 minute in, and already you're starting to see the Spain movements. So you've got Dani Carvajal out on this right-hand side, and that allows Lamine Yamal to drift infield. And if you look on the other side of the pitch, you've also got Dani Olmo picking up an almost left attacking midfield role. And look, you've got two Spain players in the pocket. Isolating different areas of space in between England's midfielders and England's defenders. Now, one thing that England did extremely well in their previous group games, even though the system didn't really work for them, was they stayed compact. They stayed narrow. They made sure that teams couldn't play within the lines, and that was one of the major takeaways from this England side, was that they knew how to defend. but the lines are too open, the lines are too free, and the pockets of space in between the banks of 4 are just far too great, and Spain exploited this time after time again. The ball gets knocked on immediately by Carvajal because he's seen the way that Lamine Yamal has been able to isolate and drive into this space. Now, a couple of things that need to be noticed and need to be mentioned here. Kobbie Mainoo is currently really just being pulled one way and then the other. So he's got one midfielder in his eye line that he needs to worry about, but at the same time he also needs to be worried about Dani Olmo. And this is where I have a particular issue with Bukayo Saka, because if you look at the way that Bukayo Saka is positioned, he's not particularly ready to follow the run of Nico Williams, and at the same time he's not really tucking in too much. Kyle Walker ends up following the run of Dani Olmo, and it leaves Nico Williams in a ton of space, and this is how it plays out. Dani Olmo makes a run and Kyle Walker follows that run, which is absolutely fine, but he's completely unaware of the run of Nico Williams down this left-hand channel. It's brilliantly worked by Lamine Yamal, who drifts in between these two players. Morata makes a fantastic run again to take away John Stones. Stones has to follow this run because he might be played in, so he has to follow the run. Kyle Walker needs to be aware of Dani Olmo, but he also needs to be aware on his left-hand shoulder of Nico Williams, or he needs to get a shout. Bukayo Saka should see this, and I believe that he doesn't do enough to either make sure he tracks the run of Nico Williams or to tell Kyle Walker, because if you look at Kyle Walker's expression right here, he has no idea, literally no idea, that behind him is the future goal scorer. And it's brilliantly worked by Spain. It's a fantastic pass, and it just goes to show the danger levels that Spain had going into this game, with Lamine Yamal mixing with Nico Williams to be able to finish this first attempt, or this first goal that Spain had. It's brilliantly worked, it's fantastically weighted, it's a great pass, really well done, but really, this is your England back 4 right here. You can put a blanket over all of them. And that's down to a lack of awareness, that's down to a lack of tactical knowledge, and it's also down to them not necessarily fully understanding the formation and Spain pulling them apart in different areas. It's fantastically worked from Spain, but pretty appalling from England. Really, really poor. And this is the problem with completely changing the entire setup from what you've previously been doing in the last week and a half, 2 weeks. This is the problem that you've got, because you've got teammates and players who don't necessarily have a system that works for them. Jude Bellingham was completely isolated and didn't really work. He had more tracking back than anything else. They didn't really offer anything going forwards, and when they did, Jude Bellingham ended up moving in field. That left a big hole on the left-hand side because Luke Shaw didn't necessarily have the physical capabilities to do a lot of overlapping, and when he did, he was leaving space in behind for Lamine Yamal to run into. It just was a complete shambles. Kobbie Mainoo and Declan Rice were completely overwhelmed at times due to the 4-man midfield that Spain have. The reason that the midfield 4 for England looked so promising was because of that midfield battle, that midfield duel, Bellingham and Foden being able to come inside. Harry Kane dropping if he ever needs to. Kane looked like a shadow of himself. And then you look at some of the other moments, it just was a shambles. Tactically, it was just crazy. And the change, I just don't see a benefit for it. Let me know in the comments below whether you saw a benefit for the change that England made, but it just seemed completely bizarre to me. This one was absolutely surreal to me, and trust me guys, there are so many of these moments, but this was one of the best ones that I could find to really illustrate my frustration, let's be honest, my irritation with this entire game. So, here we have Nico Williams drifting infield with the ball. There are a couple of things that I just want to point out in this particular scenario. So you've got Phil Foden, you've got Kobbie Mainoo, and you've got Kyle Walker. Kyle Walker has gone way too far forwards to try and close down the ball. This leaves Declan Rice in a bit of a pickle because of the spread out nature of the way that England are moving. Here we have this 4 that I mentioned earlier. 1, 2, 3, 4. You've got Morata, you've got Olmo, you've got, in this particular case, you've got Zubimendi, and of course you've got Fabian Ruiz. That creates that box formation that I mentioned, and it means that England are completely outnumbered at any given point. Jude Bellingham ends up drifting in field to try and, I suppose, bolster the numbers, and it's in this transition that it becomes really, really dangerous for England because of the way that they're not stopping the breaking of the lines of play. And it means that Spain's passing can just go and cut through them like butter. and they find this pass into Alvaro Morata, who's ending up being able to lay it off towards Dani Olmo. And here, look on the right hand side, you've got Lamine Yamal in complete acres of space. In this particular scenario, it's a 3v2. It's a 3v2 in the final of Euro 2024. It's incredible, genuinely. It's baffling to me. I can't fathom why they changed formation. I can't do it, because if this is what you're doing it for, it's just... Let's now take a look at the Spain second goal, because this is arguably even better. So, we have the entire England team, bar Ollie Watkins and Jordan Pickford, who are on opposite ends of the pitch. But for the most part, this is the midfield and this is how they set up. So, you have your back four in Walker, Stones, Gahey and Shaw. You've got your two central defensive midfielders in Bellingham and Rice, and you've got your attacking trio. Now, one thing that is really interesting going up against this Spain side, who like to prioritise the wide areas, is that this England team, as I'm sure you can see, is very, very narrow. Now, what this doesn't do is being able to combat the wide areas in particular scenarios, because it puts a lot on Kyle Walker and Luke Shaw, because of the depth that England have between their wingers and their fullbacks. This allows the Spain wingers or their fullbacks who are overlapping to really go forwards. And this is something that we highlighted in our setup video, because you need to try to nullify the way that Spain go down the flanks. Instead, Kyle Walker, in this particular instance, like he has been throughout the entire match, has been very exposed. Bukayo Saka needs to make a huge covering run to try and follow the space. He has to follow Cucurella here. He has to. He sees him on the left, he has to follow him. Declan Rice has to try to close down the space to stop the pass from going in between the lines. Remember we talked about that again? In between the lines to the likes of Oyarzabal and Nico Williams, who has ended up on this right hand side, doubling up on Luke Shaw with Lamine Yamal. None of this happens. None of this happens. And I'm not particularly blaming the players, because I actually think they look really uncomfortable in this system. They don't know whether to go, they don't know whether to stay. Kyle Walker was just pulled left, right and centre in so many different avenues. And again, Bukayo Saka does not follow the run of Marc Cucurella. And of course, the ball gets played into Oyarzabal, and he does a fantastic touch over to this left hand side. But again, Marc Cucurella is in acres of space. Look at the amount of space he has to run into because of that one touch, that singular pass from Olmo into Oyarzabal, and then you've got Marc Cucurella being able to run onto it. Kyle Walker is now a centre midfielder almost. There's no right back here. Jude Bellingham and Declan Rice are trying to cover back. It's just a mess, and it tells me that they don't know how to play this system, and I'm baffled. Baffled. Kyle Walker tries to cover. Oyarzabal makes a run into the box. It's a fantastic cross by Cucurella. We need to say that. It's a fantastic cross. It's so dangerous. And it's unfortunate for England that it's offside, but really, Spain deserve it. It was a brilliantly weighted pass. It was really well worked. But yet again, it's another moment of a side that doesn't look like they really know what they do or what they're meant to be doing. They look lost. All of this ranting and frustration and reflection should never hide the fact that Spain thoroughly deserved to win this competition. They were by far and away the best side, dealing with opposition that have been far greater in this tournament than England have. But for me, it will always be a tournament of what if. What if the formation was different? What if Jude Bellingham didn't play on the left-hand side? What if Gareth Southgate didn't persist with Phil Foden being on the left before he switched it? And it will also be the question of why. It'll be the tournament of why, the final of why. Why change it? Why switch it? And that is the most disappointing thing out of it all, because we know that these England players can offer so very much more. Thank you ever so much for watching, guys. I've thoroughly appreciated all of the support that you've given me over this Euros, and I implore you and just really encourage you to stick on the channel for the Premier League and everything else coming up in the future. But thank you ever so much for your support. I hope you enjoyed, I hope you learned something new, and I hope to see you in the next one. But until then, my friends, Take care.